Hello and welcome to week 2 of nursing care of children. This week we're going to concentrate on the principles and physiological basis of growth and development. We're going to talk about how children develop physically as well as emotionally and intellectually. We'll be using theorists Erikson and Piaget, which in your packet you have printouts that talk about the stages of development per Piaget and Erikson. I suggest that as we go through the video and you see the slides on those, make a list of Erikson's stages of development, Piaget's, and then write one sentence for each one. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but by doing that you really will solidify in a very basic form what each of those developmental stages are all about. This unit has a lot of information in it, and if you have children or have worked with children, you certainly do have an advantage because you kind of understand how a child grows, what expected development is. We're going to talk about the dynamics of a family, health, wellness, and illness, safety, and teaching and learning for children. Children grow at expected rates. Now, that does not mean that all children grow exactly the same. However, in development of children, there is a curve that they use. And there is a chart. Let me see if I can bring up a picture of one. Here is a picture of a very basic infant child growth curve chart. When a child goes to a pediatrician's office, again, when we talk about the medical home, these records would be kept there. They record the baby's birth date, age, weight, length, head circumference, and then they can chart it on here. They'll chart the weight, the length of the baby, how old they are, and growth is expected. So we expect the child, if they weigh 8 pounds at birth, by the time they're 2 weeks, they should be at least 8 pounds or right around there. Children lose weight after they're born. Then when they're 2 months old, they want them to have gained a pound or 2, and this is going to go up throughout the course of their life. And you can see over here there's percentiles. So if the baby is 3 months old and they only weigh, what would this make them? 8.5 pounds. They are only on the 2% for their weight. Now if their height was on 2% also, they would just be a little tiny person perhaps. Maybe if they have little tiny parents. But as they grow, there should be some elevation to it. What you don't want to see, and the reason that this chart is so important, is let's say at 6 months old, the child weighed 12 pounds. Okay? Then at 9 months old, they only weighed 10 pounds. So there's this huge weight loss. Well, when that happens, there's something wrong with the child because they're not gaining weight, and so they're failing to thrive. So that is the biggest important part of this chart. Another important part of this chart, and it's going to be brought up again later, but I think it's a good visual tool for you when you think about physical development. Say the child is on the 50 percentile. So at 9 months old, what does that make them weigh? That makes them weigh about 16, 17, about 18 pounds. And they're on the 50 percentile. Well, let's say you go up there to their height and they are only on the 5 percentile. So if you have a kid who's on the 50 percentile for weight, 5 percentile for height, you have a chubby kid. Now that's not the worst thing in the world, but it certainly is worth looking at. So these charts go on and on through the child's development up until they're teenagers. So again, there will be some variance in their growth. When there is a problem, They're not growing fast enough. They're growing too fast. The earlier the intervention, the better, whether it's physical development, emotional, psychosocial. The sooner that you can react, the better. And development also includes how children play, learn, speak, and act. Over here is a great video that's embedded here by the CDC on the growth and development of children. So from this view in Screencast-O-Matic, I can't open up that video for you, but please open it from your PowerPoint and watch that video. You'll be glad that you did. Growth and development takes on two forms. There's the physical size, which is measured by any part of the body, and the development, like how are they doing intellectually, how are they doing emotionally and socially. All of those are part of growth, and that's the difference between growth and development. Remember that growth and development are always orderly and sequential, even though children may grow at different orders. There is a specific pattern. No two children ever grow exactly the same. That curve, like I showed you on the chart, is a basis for assessment, and it gives you what to expect as far as physical development. And then you can also create some ideas of intellectual, psychosocial, motor development also. An example of that would be that most babies can sit up and with support at 6 months, begin to crawl between 7 and 9. That doesn't mean all babies are going to, and it doesn't mean there's something wrong with them if they don't. Some babies don't like to crawl because they have siblings who get everything for them. So what do they need to be moving around, wasting their energy for? So there's lots of reasons when children don't develop that aren't necessarily a bad thing. There are different things that affect growth and development. Biology. What are your genetics? What's your gender? What's your race and ethnicity? What's going on in your family? What's the health status? What are they feeding you? What are the family dynamics? Is it supportive? All these different things. What's going on in the community? All of these affect the growth and development of a child. When we talk about growth and development, we're going to define the age groups this way. An infant is birth to 12 months, toddler 1 to 3 years, preschooler 4 to 5 years, school-age child 5 to 12 years, and an adolescent 12 to 21 years. These are the same definitions that you will see in your textbooks. Now, sometimes you'll see an infant as birth to 18 months. Sometimes you'll see it all the way up to 2 years old. You'll see toddlers starting at 18 months. But we're going to go with what your textbook says and test. So when you get in your ATI, when you get into other texts, you might see things that are different, but just go with what's in the book. These are important factors to know as far as, again, what general normal development is. A child 0 to 4 weeks gains 5 to 7 ounces per week. I'm not going to read all of these to you. You can read them yourself, but it does give you an idea of the development of an infant. You may want to make a chart that just has a few things. I'm not going to test you on specific things. But there possibly could be on the boards different questions about size and growth and development that are specific. Biggest thing, and I can't remember if I already said this to you, when you are considering how a child grows, again, we talked about ethnicity, we talked about heredity, and nutritional status is the ultimate, most important part of how they develop, because if they're not being fed, they will not grow. In infants, they have I'm sure you've all heard of the soft spot in the top of their head. They have a posterior fontanelle, that's what that's called. That is where the bones of the skull fuse together. There's one way in the back of the head, and that closes at about 10 to 12 weeks. And then there's one at the top, and again, that's the soft spot you hear of, and that usually closes between 12 and 18 months, certainly before the age of 2. Their head and chest are almost the same size. Their head's bigger when they're born. It's the biggest part of their body. And then as they grow, the head and chest circumference are pretty much equal by the age of 1 year. Again, I'm not going to read all these slides to you. This talks about the development of the body in the first, in year 1 through 12, how much weight they'll gain, and you can read and understand that for yourself. It's pretty basic information. Most children are done growing by adolescence. There might be a small amount of growth that happens after age 18 in boys that can grow up till 21. In my psych classes, I've learned that the male brain is not completely developed until age 25. So bear that in mind, you young girls who are considering dating somebody who's very young. Here is gross motor development. Children develop, it's called cephalocaudal development. And what that means is they grow from the head to the toes. So they learn to move their head, then they learn to move their feet. Head goes first, then their feet. They can lift their head up, then they can push up on their arms. They do all that before they start to crawl. So cephalocaudal means their head, and so the head moves first. The head does everything first, and then the body follows. If you've ever watched a child when they're learning to turn over, the first thing that rolls over is their head, and the body follows it. Gross motor skills. Fine motor skills are learning to pick up a Cheerio. That takes pinch your fingers to do that. A gross motor skill is rolling over, stomach to back, back to stomach, sitting up, starting to crawl. Gross means the use of all of your body or most of your body, and fine is the eye-hand coordination and the body working like a tweezer. Within this development, another thing, cephalocaudal, like I said, is head to toe. Another thing you need to know is that children grow and develop proximally distally. So what that means is the center of their body, okay, develops first, and then they develop distally. So you've never seen a child with really long arms and a little tiny body. The body develops first. So just like the physical part develops first, so does the movement and the gross motor skills. Proximal distal develop means that they're going to learn to roll over and move this whole body, because the body's what does the moving before they use their little tiny fingers to pick up a Cheerio. Gross motor development, again, this is more continued, 8 to 9 months. They're sitting up steadily. They can support. They're starting to look around at what's going on around them. By 9 months, they can usually crawl on all fours. They pull each other up to stand, by the coffee table. By the way, just to let you know that 98% of suturing with children involves a coffee table. So there's some anticipatory guidance for you as parents and for you as nurses. Tell people to put their coffee tables away until their children are older. By just around 12 months, they can stand alone and perhaps they can even walk. as their growth continues, they can explore, they start taking steps. By 15 months, they're climbing. By 18 months, they can run pretty effectively. So that's our first video on growth and development. Hold on for video number 2.